Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Two Player Mode. My name is Danny, and this is where we delve deep into the evolution and impact of video games, especially today through the lens of those who document and shape their history. Today, we're joined by Dave Cook, an acclaimed author known for his comprehensive explorations of iconic video game genres, from the action-packed worlds of beat-em-ups to the strategic challenges of run-and-gun shooters. Dave's insights bring the pixels to life, so get ready to level up your knowledge as we navigate the rich tapestry of video game history with Dave Cook. And Dave, welcome to Two Player Mode.
Hello, yeah, thank you very much for having me. Always happy to talk about retro gaming and just gaming in general. So yeah, this a real treat for me. Thank you.
Very cool. I'm very happy to have you here. Also, you are an accomplished writer for video game history books, but you're also an acclaimed award-winning comic book writer, with your newest book or anthology being, of course, the Killtopia series. But with that in mind, I just want you to give us a little bit of your origin story, especially as it pertains to video games.
Yeah, my first brush with video games was as a freelance games journalist, actually, here in Scotland.
Okay.
Ever since high school, I dreamt of being like a game reviewer. I didn't quite know back then what was involved. In my young mind, it was just playing video games and writing about them, which obviously couldn't be further from the truth, right? But after high school, after university, I got a journalism major. That's my university degree. Got into the world of freelance game writing, then actually did it full time for a number of publications, including places like Retro Gamer, who I'm sure you might be aware of, Games TM, VG 24/7, and sort of freelanced, all around the sort of industry. And then eventually just ended up doing comics. Essentially what happened was I wanted to write my own novel, right? As many writers do. I'm sick of writing these games reviews and, news articles. I want to write something that will last forever. So I wrote a really terrible book. And what I noticed was I was really bad at describing things at the time. Back then we're talking like 2010, 2009. Okay. So I thought, hey, I'm just going to turn it into a comic and have someone draw it.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't convey, feelings and emotions and themes and things, right? So, so I kind of got into comics out of sheer laziness and a lack of skill. But yeah, here we are, some 10 years later now. I'm doing it. So yeah, people must like what I write. I think.
There you go. So you mean it isn't just straightforward as it seems, like you play a game and you write about it?
Yeah, it's so funny that, isn't it? I used to think that was the job. Funnily enough, it's a really at the time, it was a very low paying industry as a games journalist. I won't say how little I got paid for my first job, but it was like, I could have done better, working a till a register somewhere. I could have,
Yeah.
But
I got you.
the excuse that the managing director of the company always used was, well, you get to play games and write about them. And if you quit, someone else will take your job by tomorrow. So what do you want to do?
Yeah.
He wasn't a very nice man. But he had a point. It was a desirable job. Everyone wanted to do it at the time. I don't know why anyone would want to do it now, though. The amount of abuse that journalists get. But I still, to bring this full circle, I still freelance maybe just a few times a year. Okay. I kind of moved on to more long form, like essay type stuff. Mm-hmm. So I currently do 1 or 2 pieces a year for Lock On. They're like a new gaming journal that comes out, once a quarter.
Okay.
Really cool if anyone hasn't seen it, to check it out. It's there's like no internal screenshots. It's all like original artwork and
oh wow, okay,
just
cool.
Really cool, like long form pieces and interviews. And the next piece I have coming out, I actually managed to get the core development team of the old Tenchu Stealth Assassins games in a room in Japan. I wasn't in Japan. I dialed in, but got them all together in a room, the old team, and we just talked about making what was effectively the first 3D stealth game, because it predates Metal Gear Solid, right? By only a few months, but fascinating. So that's the kind of stuff I'm into now. The more longer form,
right,
single game kind of focus.
Well, that's really cool. I mean, well, speaking of single game focus, um, complete opposite of that was your first book for Bitmap Books, which was I have it here. Hold on. I knew it's called Go Straight, and that's a very thick book with a lot of different games in it.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
covered
it's
nearly 4 decades of beat 'em up games in that. So that's how did you manage that in your brain? Just all those books just together.
yeah, I'm one of these annoying people who just like, if I have an idea for something and it makes sense in my head, I just start doing it
Uh-huh.
without considering too much the amount of work involved. um because you got to, I'm a very much a learn by doing kind of person, right?
Yeah, me too.
Within
Yeah.
reason, I knew that as a fan of, the genre, I sort of knew that. I mean, I have so many of these games physically. I've emulated a lot of them, which I know they say you shouldn't do, but some of the games you just cannot get
Hmm.
anywhere now,
I hear
which
you.
is a shame. And I'm a big fan of game preservation as well, right? Like these games are works of art. I don't
Yeah.
think we have to convince anyone of that at this point. But when that access is kind of limited, it just stops people from playing and discovering potentially their new favorite game, right? And
Hmm.
that's a shame. So I as a collector myself, as an avid player, I wanted to just document every beat 'em up game that was out there. Within reason, again, there's a few that I couldn't get working on emulation that are kind of lost to time. Like maybe
Hmm.
the BIOS files don't exist or they don't run quite well anymore
Yeah.
on modern emulators. But yeah, within reason, I wanted to document most of the games in that genre, which ended up being, God, I mean, I think it was like, because we only did like 1984 to 2020. So
Okay.
present games aside,
Yeah.
there was something about 220 odd games in there, and they all have substantial, some of them have substantial write-ups, and that's why the book is so massive. I mean, people have joked that the physical copy of my book could be used as a weapon in a beat 'em up game to kill someone. um, but that's kind of Bitmap Book's whole MO, right? It's the coffee table book, it's
Yeah.
the quality,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
tangible, but yeah, I just started writing a few test pieces myself before I even spoke to Bitmap. I the first two games I pitched were Kung Fu, on the NES, not the arcade version, but specifically
Okay.
the NES version,
Okay.
um, and Splatterhouse, the original. So I wrote those up. One of my designer friends made some mock-ups for me, like really cool looking presentations, just to get a pitch package together for publishers. And Bitmap were the first company I pitched, and they were the first to get back to me, like almost within a few days, and just said,
Awesome.
We've never done anything on just like one genre like this before. Let's have a chat." It wasn't like an instant yes, but it was like, let's
Hmm.
have a chat. Sort of explained the format I sort of saw in my head, year to year, comprehensive. And yeah, it very quickly said, yeah, let's do it. So
Cool.
it's, probably a great deal of luck involved as well, because it just so happened they hadn't done a book like that before. Um, but that's how it kind of happened, yeah. And then I just 2 years later had a book on the shelves. It took a lot of work, and I work a full time, well, almost full time job. I do Monday to Thursday contract writing for companies
Oh,
and stuff.
wow.
So
Okay. Yeah. That.
it's a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot. But I love the genre, and I kind of selfishly, I guess, wanted to be the guy who wrote the book on it.
I hear
It
you.
was just kind of a dream come true, to be honest, to write about a genre that I loved so much. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it didn't feel like work at times, because it absolutely killed me at points. But I don't know. I just knew that, focused on that end goal, like we're going to have this reference guide, it's going to be great. Of course, now since the book's come out, the genre's exploded like crazy, and now there's like so many more games, and people are like, "You're gonna do like an expanded version or a second version?" I'm like, I don't think I have it in me yet, but maybe later. um, but no, that is nice to see though. That I think since Streets of Rage 4 came out, I'm not saying it was because of this game specifically, but there was a sort of convenient upswing, in the amount of beat 'em up
Okay.
games that have come out. And
Hmm.
it was a nice arc to tell in the book, because I think at the very start, of course, the 80s and 90s were just full of that kind of genre,
Yeah.
right? There was
Yeah.
so many beat 'em ups.
Hmm.
But then you start getting into the 3D era, so like the late 2000s, early 2010s, it came almost a complete drop off.
Yeah.
And now then you see it starting to ramp up towards the end of the book, and now we're just in what I've seen many people online call a second golden age for the genre, and I do believe that there's no shortage of new projects in the genre coming out, which as a fan is great to see. So yeah, maybe I'll need to do another edition at some point. Give it another 10 years.
Well, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced when you were doing your research for the books?
It was games that actually had very little in the way of coverage, right? So very little in the way of developer interviews, reviews even. So there were some games, trying to remember some of the names, like Oriental Legend. So the games that were done by like IGS, who were like a Taiwanese company. They do like Knights of Valor, Oriental Legend, things like that. Not as much coverage because their arcade games came out in the late 2000s. They actually came to the arcade scene quite late, but a lot of their games now, I think there's like one or two compilations on Switch, the IGS compilations, I think they're called, something like that. But they came to the genre quite late, and some of their games have very little documentation or even a very little fan base. So it was primarily the games that didn't have a lot of references for me to research. Where, you're talking like something like Streets of Rage 2, right? There's Yuzo Koshiro's done lots of interviews in the past. So many reviews. There's a few making ofs out there that I could pull from. But yeah, the ones where there was very little of that historical record already, that was the difficulty, I think.
Well, I guess you created that reference then for other people in the future. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think where there wasn't much historical sources to pull from, those reviews, those write-ups tended to be more kind of impressions. So kind of explaining just what the game is like what does it feel like to control? Is it actually quite decent? What I was keen to do though was never to be too negative about any of the games. I tried to find, and this is just me as a person, as a gamer, I always tried to find the redeeming qualities. Because I didn't want the book to be negative. It was a celebration, so even something objectively terrible like Baby's Kids on the SNES, which is the worst game in the book, there's still some little bit of things here that you think, oh, that's kind of quaint, or that's quite clever, or almost like a B movie. It's so bad it's good. Some games can be that, I mean, I'm a big fan of the 2010s era, like AA games, they call them, right, where it's like mid-budget, mid-tier, like PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 games. They're kind of janky and buggy, and they don't have the big blockbuster budgets, but some of them are great, like Dead to Rights Retribution, for example. I'm actually looking at my collection up here off in the distance. Yeah, I mean, I love that game. It's got so many flaws, and it's objectively janky and like mid, but I love it. It's got a charm to it, and you can tell the team behind it really were trying to make something decent, despite their lack of resources.
Yeah.
And the same is true in Go Straight. There's a lot of like middling kind of, I mean, one of my favorite trilogies in beat 'em up history is the Rushing Beat trilogy, which is a Rival Turf. What are the other ones? They've all got different names in the West. I can't remember them all now. But the Rushing Beat trilogy by Jellicoe, objectively, again, kind of mid-tier, but I kind of love it. There's an earnestness to it, and the music is great. They're really good at soundtracks. So yeah, I tried to find something nice in all of them if I can.
That's cool. Yeah.
Just because I don't want people to think negatively about the genre that I love. And sure, there are some, crap games in there, but they've all got something for something,
I think you said it best. It was a celebration of the games, not a review or a hit piece on them. It's a celebration, something you love.
Yeah, and even when I was a journalist, reviewing games for a living, I doled out some crappy scores, but I think what a lot of people tend to forget is that an average game is a 5 out of 10. That's the middle, right? Anything above that's above average. So I'd give like a 6 out of 10 or something. I would get some abuse online because it might have been a game that people were really looking forward to, like, you should quit, man. How did you get a job? And I'm like, yeah, but 5's like the middle, right? 6 is actually above average. And if you read the review, you'd see, hey, there's problems, but here's some cool things. And that's always been my philosophy, because I think otherwise, if you go into a game trying to find fault, even as a player, it's just going to hinder your experience. You're not going to enjoy it as much. If you're always looking for those issues. I'd say as an ex-critic, I still play games and I find my mind start going, oh, that mechanic's not quite right, or that, and I have to stop myself. It's like, just enjoy it. You don't. This isn't your job anymore. You know, just play it and enjoy it.
I
But
do
yeah,
this. Yeah, I do something similar when I'm watching a movie or something, and I just can't help it. I'm like just trying to break down how they make a scene, and just if stop that, just enjoy the film. Don't try and question where it's going or what they were trying to do. Just enjoy it. So yeah, I can
yeah.
understand that.
And you know what? Like that's kind of speaks to my love, because I do the same with action movies. I still do that all the time because I'm talking like practical action movies, right? Where there's
Mhm.
choreography and very, very granular and very well thought out, like
Yeah.
action set pieces and staging and things like that. I'm just a geek for that kind of stuff. So, I love when it's all been planned and you can, like shaky cam and stuff. I can't stand that in
Yeah.
action, like fight scenes, because where I really respect the craft is when you can really follow where everyone is in the room, what they're doing. Fantastic level of detail that takes months to execute.
Hmm.
But that, action movies and that sort of love for that, I think, is what probably got me onto the beat 'em up genre at an
Yeah.
early age.
Yeah.
Because my dad was a big, sorry, is, so he's still with us. I don't know why I said was. Um, he was a big fan of like Enter the Dragon, like loved Bruce Lee. That was his childhood
Hmm.
hero growing up. So I at an early age got onto all that, and yeah, I just think by extension that whole, it's the simplicity of the genre as well, right?
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
as implied by the name of the book, Go Straight, the name is derived from the stage one music from Streets of Rage 2, which is by Yuzo Koshiro, which is Go Straight.
Okay.
And that phrase just sums up the genre perfectly. You're
Yeah.
typically walking left to right,
Yep.
going straight through like wave after wave of enemies. And just by the end of some of these games, you feel like you have survived a gauntlet, because it's
Yeah.
all, Twitch gaming, reaction time, watching your spacing. Again, like an action movie, right? That spacing and all that kind of thing.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, Go Straight. It just summed up for me. Like, yeah, you're facing this whole crime syndicate worth of bad guys, and it's only you and your fists. Go for it. Love it. Um, but where I find like the most interesting features to write up in the book actually were the ones that, because at its core the genre is very simple, right? You have very few buttons. There's not too much in the way of inputs.
Yeah.
Although some of the games do go a bit further with that, like Shadow Warriors on arcade, which I don't think's ever had a home release. That was a Tecmo one.
Okay.
That game has like a whole soul capture system. You can basically absorb enemies and then you take on their command list. And
Oh.
so there's
Okay.
like, I think when you consider that, there's something like 20 different playable characters in that game, which is huge for a beat 'em up.
Yeah.
But it has contextual blocking like a 2D fighter. So if you hold backwards while facing an enemy, even though it's like a belt scroller, it
Hmm.
still knows when you're blocking. It's really intuitive for its time. But it has like crazy directional inputs like a Street Fighter game, things like that.
Okay.
Really impressive. But those kind of games aside, usually it's just very simple
Yeah.
inputs, commands. So you might think that a lot of these games are kind of simplistic and kind of samey. Where the real genius lies is just how it uses those buttons. Like again, Streets of Rage 2 for me is the pinnacle of the genre, in that you can mix up some inputs. If you hold certain directions while doing different things, different moves happen. There's even charge moves where you hold down punch for a few seconds and let
Okay.
it go.
Hmm.
The hitboxes are perfect. The hit stun is perfect. You never feel like you've been cheaped out. Some games you can be comboing an enemy and they can just instantly start hitting you back through it. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, no, because then none of your attacks are safe. And it just
Right.
makes every action feel, like a risk, and gets kind of frustrating. Where Streets of Rage 2 for me just nails everything perfectly. So when there's a game that has that hidden depth and all those qualities, that's when I super get into the writing, and there's so much to say and unlock and explain. And hopefully that came through in the book. That was the aim anyway, to just reveal that, hey, this genre is not all the samey. It's not all samey. It's not simplistic.
Yeah.
There's so much hidden depth here, but yeah.
Well, well, video games, they often reflect like the cultural sentiment of the times and whatnot. Could you share an example from the book where a game captured the essence of its era?
I won't say Streets of Rage 2 again, because that would be my answer. But I'll quickly explain why, though, right? Because it's that soundtrack. The soundtrack
Okay.
is phenomenal. I'm actually writing a piece on it just now that I hopefully might turn into a book at some point, like a novel, actually,
Okay.
rather than reference guide, but I need to work out the logistics of all that. But no, I mean, Yuzo Koshiro and Motohiro Kawashima like were massively influenced by Detroit's techno scene, the rising pop scene and sort of dance scene in the States at the time. Koshiro actually went over to America to basically learn more about the culture, learn more about the music, because he himself was interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a guy that's, you know, properly classically trained on piano. He actually trained for a while under the guy who composed most of Studio Ghibli's soundtracks, a pianist.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I only found this out recently as research for this potentially new book that I'm doing. So, you would think, and he's a violinist, you know, he can play violin like proficiently. So it's like, but then he just got really into the whole dance scene, the dance culture, that kind of thing. And you can hear it in the music, you know, they together, those two made the Mega Drive, or sorry, the Genesis sound chip sound like unlike any other Mega Drive game or Genesis game that's ever existed, in my opinion. And it was all these little tricks, you know, it was things like he coded his own, you know, beat making language in BASIC.
Oh, wow.
He's such a, I'm kind of jealous of the guy because he could do anything. But he was a programmer too, right? And he created his own like sort of language to like compose the music. And to get more out of the sound chip and the cartridge, you know, hardware inside the cartridge, he did things like, you know, flipping the channel rapidly so it sounded like the music was going a bit quicker. Just all these little things. But music aside, it's just the style of it. You know, the denim, the leather, the neon lights, arcade machines, just all these little cultural things. And it just feels like a perfect time capsule of 90s sort of dance culture. I'm a bit too young to fully appreciate that scene because I was still, I was probably just about to enter high school when Streets of Rage 3 came out. So that I was a bit later than that, but yeah, just a perfect time capsule. I'd also say that probably games like Double Dragon, even though it's like technically a post-apocalyptic game, it still had the sort of, you know, the fashion of the era, you know, that sort of, again, denim on denim, stonewash, you know,
absolutely,
mohawks, things like that. But the creator of that game did the foreword in Go Straight as well. And
oh, cool.
you know, originally when he was creating Renegades, it was all, I think that was originally coined. I don't know if any talks happened, but I think it was originally coined as an adaptation of the Warriors, or at least it was inspired by the Warriors.
Oh, really? Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's like fighting a different gang on each stage on their turf and things like that. I think it was maybe inspired by it. I don't think it ever got to the point where they were going to adapt it or anything, or it was going to be official or anything. But I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong on that. It's been a long time since I wrote the book, but yeah. So I think a lot of those games captured the era. Probably the Konami licensed beat 'em ups as well, Simpsons, Ninja Turtles. Those shows were so massive at the time. Again, they just capture that era perfectly too. Yeah, I'd say those are my kind of picks. There's a few others, but they're not as popular. But those are the main ones, I think.
The Simpsons and Ninja Turtles. Oh goodness, I remember playing those in the arcade. The 4 characters at a time, getting 3 of your friends, and oh goodness, that was a lot of good times. Yeah.
I do miss. I mean, I'm still a big arcade fan, you know, and thankfully here in the UK, there's a few spots around the country where there are new arcades opening up, and
oh, cool.
They're not just like, you know, you see some arcade bars, and this isn't a diss on arcade bars because I like them too, but they sometimes have like the same few few cabinets, and but there are a few legit ones that are like, you know, run by people who actually collect and preserve like these amazing cabs, and actually, you know, they're proper arcades like you used to get back in the day. And so it's really nice to see that coming back. But I'm the same as you. I miss like standing at that Ninja Turtles cabinet next to three other kids completing the game. It's so much fun back in the day.
I think it's different now as an adult because now we have money to play the game. Back, at least when I was a kid, I was like barely scratching out maybe $1 worth of quarters just to go play a couple games. So it's really cool that these retro gaming, even if there are gaming bars, are popping up more frequently for us to go enjoy and I guess live out our youth better.
Well, I used to have this dream where if I got like, you know, the advance that I got for Go Straight, I always said to my wife, I said, if this happens, I'm gonna like buy a Simpsons arcade machine because that's my favorite. Not my favorite beat 'em up game, but just that cabinet is so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it is.
And I personally have, like, same as you, that's the one I played, with like three random kids. We almost
Mhm.
completed the game. We
Mhm.
just didn't have enough pocket money to make it. But I'll never forget that. Then I looked into how much it can cost to maintain an arcade machine. Then I was like, nope, I'm out. Because if like one component goes in that, right, you got to find a
Yeah,
specialist.
true.
I
Mhm.
can't do that. So yeah, I put that idea on ice. I'm just waiting for One Up Arcade to bring out the Simpsons arcade machine over in the UK. They haven't done it yet. It's
Fun.
only in the US, I think, for now. So, but as soon as it hits the UK, I'm buying it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, let's switch it up a little bit and talk about a book that maybe hasn't been released yet, if you don't mind. And that's really focusing on a different genre altogether, and that's the genre of run and gun shooters. So, what inspired you to write a book on run and gun games?
So after Go Straight, I was pretty broken in terms of like just that final dash to the deadline, was
Yeah, I can imagine.
brutal. But it was to be expected. These things always happen, right? So that isn't a diss on anyone. It's just it always happens. You find last minute typos and you're
Hmm.
combing through every page, just to make sure there's nothing wrong. And inevitably you will find something. So there was a lot of last minute fix ups and things like that. I took about 6 months out and then I just got the itch again. And I was like, right. And I just actually, a part of it was just seeing how well received Go Straight was,
Okay.
the reviews on the Bitmap site and just like online in general have been great. Like I genuinely just like every time I see a nice review, it makes me genuinely happy because like that's what I wanted it to be. And
Yeah.
people commented on how positive it sounded. It didn't, again, it didn't put any of the games down. It was just like,
Hmm.
and most of all, the one thing I mostly wanted was to help people discover these games that I mentioned before weren't easy to find or perhaps
Yeah.
didn't have an audience. One of the key ones was Ninja Baseball Batman by Irem,
Okay.
which is one of the best beat 'em ups I've ever played, but it flopped in the arcades in Japan. I think only, oh God, again, it's a while since I've written the book. It's either between 800 and 2,000 cabinets were only ever made. And it basically flopped. It didn't make a lot of money.
Okay.
So it didn't get like a wide release globally. It hasn't appeared on any modern formats, but through emulation, people can play it. So a lot of people have since played it and we're like, oh yeah, he was right. That game is great. And I'm like, yes. I actually work with the guy who made that game too. So me and my friend Steve have written like a comic book reboot of it. The first issue's out now. And we're working on issue 2. So it's cool. It's just
Cool.
amazing that off the back of Go Straight, I
Yeah,
got to
that's
write a comic
cool.
book on one of my favorite beat 'em ups. So yeah, issue 2 should be out later on this year, but yeah, watch this space. But yeah, run and gun. So the short answer is it's just my next again favorite genre.
Okay.
um, I'm a huge Contra fan. And I'm talking like the whole series. I even enjoyed Contra Rogue Core, which a lot of people hated. Again, trying to see the good things in everything. I really
Hmm.
enjoyed it. But yeah, I'm a huge Contra fan. Gunstar Heroes, one of my top 10 games of all time. Cuphead would be a more modern favorite of mine. And I just love that genre so much. So I just went to Sam at Bitmap Books, the owner of the company, and just said, "Hey, would you be up for another book, kind of like Go Straight, but on this genre?" And yeah, he just pretty much said yes again, because we I guess we had proven that Go Straight there was an audience for that kind of
Yeah.
genre
Yeah.
specific book, right? But yeah, I said yes, and I had to get to work. The process was I learned a lot from the first time though. So the process was like looking at every sort of resource I could find to try and build a as close to definitive list of every run and gun shooter ever made as I could. The
Hmm.
thing with Run and Gun, the new book, it's not a complete guide. Like there is no way we could possibly
No.
fit. The book would be even way
Yeah.
bigger than it's already bigger than Go Straight. I'll say that much.
Okay.
And we had to just cap it at some point. But we've got all of the usual suspects, right? We've got, and this is from 1979 all the way up to 2023.
Oh, wow.
So it's an even bigger time span.
Yeah.
There's about 350 games in it at last count, if I remember correctly. It's got all the heavy hitters, all the usual suspects, but it's also got a lot of outliers that are either definitely worth investigating and some of them that you probably shouldn't play. But again, me being positive, there may be some reasons why you might want to. But yeah, I'm not that I'm not proud of Go Straight, but I'm even more proud of this one because I leaned even more into the sort of journalistic side of it with this one.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I have done so much more research on, not that I didn't on Go Straight, but Go Straight was more of a blend of reference, impressions, and making of. This one, I've tried to just lean into the trivia and the making of as much as possible this time. So there's a lot more pull quotes from old interviews, like old I had to go back into like the Wayback Machine online and like Internet Archives just to try and find some old quotes. Certainly for games like Turrican, where all the people involved in that game didn't give too much press at the time, but managed to find a few things. I was looking at old scans of like EGM and Nintendo Power, and I really dug like tenfold into the research this time. So because I wanted people this time to treat this one as a reference guide, but also like find just mind-blowing facts that they might not have known before. And I truly believe we've achieved that with this one. Again, not all games, it wasn't possible with all games where there wasn't too much historical record. Games like Atomic Runner Chelnov, which, if you've never played it, is batshit crazy. It's about a guy who basically survives Chernobyl. They never say it's Chernobyl, but it is Chernobyl because the game got banned in a few countries because of it. And basically he emerges with superpowers and tries to fight the people who harmed them. But then it just gets super weird. Like it almost becomes like an Escher, like H.R. Geiger kind of weird, like abstract running gun shooter. It's very, very strange. And I don't know what the hell's going on in it. But yeah, that's an example of just the really sort of like fringe, like really weird games that probably no one's really heard of that they should check out. But yeah, I just love the genre and thought, hey, let's do it again. I've since started wondering about what a third book would be, but I'm nowhere near in that headspace. Yeah, I need a lot more time off before I can start thinking.
Well, I guess the next other genre would be like role-playing games, right? RPGs, how it progressed in the online RPGs. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, so there's a few contenders that are at the top of my list, and I'm not saying any of these are ever going to happen, right? But if I did do a third one, it's either going to be 3D hack and slash, so Bayonetta, God of War, No More Heroes, things like
Diablo,
that kind of thing. So like more like the action Dynasty Warriors, so more like 3D hack and slash, like Twitch kind of style. Stellar Blade would be a recent example of that kind of genre. Because that really is the evolution from beat 'em ups. What I sort of mentioned in Go Straight is as 3D gaming started to come into prominence, you saw games like Die Hard Arcade, which effectively it's not a side-scrolling beat 'em up, but it did mention a few of those 3D ones because they have so much of the DNA.
Yeah.
It would be wrong of me not to include them. So if games like Die Hard Arcade are only a few steps away from those, over-the-shoulder third-person hack and slash kind of games, they really aren't that far away. So to do a book on that, we'd almost feel like Go Straight Part 2, I suppose. The other one is light gun shooters, because I'm a huge fan of light gun shooters. That has its own logistical problems though. Like, how do you play them all? Because emulation for light guns, it's possible. You can just play with a mouse instead of reticule. But if I was going to do that properly, I'd want to get pictures of the hardware, like all the gun peripherals. That would be the tricky part. I'd need to find people who had them all and could take photographs, But I love that genre. Just the tech behind it's fascinating too. But the first game I ever played was a light gun game in the early 80s, and it was for my Sinclair ZX Spectrum.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys had that in the States. Like it was a tape loader. You played cassette tape games. And it had a light gun. It was a James Bond shoot 'em up game.
Oh, fun.
And so when you play a light gun game, the way that it tells where you've shot is the screen flickers black to reflect the beam of light back at the gun.
Okay.
And that's, it takes milliseconds, and that basically tells the game where you shot. This game, because it's on such old tech, the screen goes black for like a whole 2 seconds. Then it comes back on to register the hit. It's so slow. But to me as a kid, I was like, oh, this is great. Because I'd seen my dad, I saw my dad play games like Operation Wolf in the arcades and stuff, you know, when I was a kid. And I'm like, this is like Operation Wolf in the home. Couldn't have been further from the truth. But hey, you know, again, it's an early genre that I loved. I would love to document it somehow, but yeah, like I said, I need a lot of time off first before I could think about that.
Well, you've taken your love of video games, and with your comic books, you've crossed over into that realm. So how do you see those? Do you see any intersecting trends in your writing between, especially with your influences and that, in between the two mediums? How do you see them crossing over for yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Because one of my comic books, it's still an ongoing series. It's still it's a few issues in now, but it's not finished yet. It's called BPM, Beatdowns Per Minute, and it basically is me and my friend Steve doing our own version of Streets of Rage. It's set in '92. It's about some vigilante cops fighting a drug syndicate.
Very cool.
Neon lights, and it's just full of references to like that whole genre. So if you're a fan of beat 'em ups, yeah, check it out. It's on my store. But in terms of the reason why I wrote that book, aside from it being my favorite genre, you know, beat 'em ups, I wanted to, as an action fan, I wanted to see if I could try and do really coherent action scenes in a static medium, right? So comics. So my love of those practical action movies, you know, could I translate that into comic books? So it was a bit challenging at first. You know, we have pretty complex fight scenes in it, but I was very careful to sort of think of making sure the scene geography was coherent between the I suppose comics don't have camera angles, but you know what I mean, the perspective changes and things like that. Yeah. But people are consistent, you know, no matter what angle you're looking at it from. If someone's going to pull a gun or a weapon, you know, we have to show an establishing shot to show that happening. So yeah, I kind of thought that was a nice little challenge for me as a writer, from my love of, you know, action movies. But then we just melded that together with like so many references from the beat 'em up genre, and even like tournament fighters. There's some Tekken references in there. Street Fighter. So yeah, I do think I do think that comes across, and certainly when it comes to my main series, Killtopia, which is so different. You know, it's a cyberpunk kind of thing. Again, that was primarily inspired by video games. You know, No More Heroes is one of my favorite games. I don't know if you know, to anyone who hasn't played that game, it's about an assassin, a guy who just decides to become an assassin just because he wants to, and then accidentally finds himself part of the assassin ranking league, where everyone below him is trying to kill him, so he has to keep going up the ranks. Killtopia is a comic series about sort of like high-tech bounty hunters called Wreckers, who hunt killer mecha robots for money, fame, and fortune. And the whole idea of gamifying that came from No More Heroes, you know, a ranking league, and all these big, you know, brash assassins who've got all these like signature weapons and traits and personas, and that's really where it all came from, and a few other influences as well, but that was one of the main ones. But yeah, I just video games never leave my head when I'm writing, you know, when I'm writing fiction. You know, I'm always like subconsciously getting inspired by something I've played at some point, things like that. And of course, like my series BPM, I'm always chucking little Easter eggs in there and things like that.
Nice.
It's always nice when someone just messages me and goes, "Hey, see that thing there? Is that this?" And I'm like, "Yes." And it's so cool that they connected the dots, right? And, So yeah, I don't know. I think there's definitely a crossover for sure.
That's cool. Yeah, definitely. It sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've even sort of dabbled in video game writing as well. You know, I wrote a script for a game a few years back that came out, and I was a consultant on a beat 'em up that I think it's in early access, or it hasn't entered early access yet. It's called Final Fright. It's a Halloween themed side-scrolling beat 'em up.
Cool.
It's on Steam. I think there's a Steam page on there. I don't think it's come out yet, but I just acted as a kind of story consultant for it, because there's no like, you know, beat 'em ups aren't known for their deep narratives, but the developer, Luke Cozy Labs is their name. They wanted to basically say, hey, we do need some sort of like narrative that we know as the developers that thread all this together.
Yeah.
We need some reason for like the stages we've picked. And so I sort of worked out, you know, who the characters might be, how why the characters are going from one stage to the next. So you could have little transitions and things like that. So that was fun. I didn't like write the script. I mean, there's no dialogue in the game. It's just a beat 'em up, you know. But it was quite nice to sort of help them flesh that out. I'd love to do more of that kind of stuff, you know. But yeah, beat 'em ups aren't really known for their hefty dialogue, so it might not be the right genre to be trying to get working. But you know, you never know.
Or maybe when you adapt a beat 'em up game to a movie, and they're going to need dialogue. So there you go.
Yeah,
That's where you...
potentially. Yeah. That's the thing with me. You know, I used to think all the time, like, hey, maybe you should just focus on one form of writing, like your comics or your video game books or whatever. But it's just not how my brain works.
I hear you.
My brain just pinballs from whatever I'm actively interested in. So, you know, I've kind of put my comic projects on ice just now to explore potentially doing the Streets of Rage 2 soundtrack book or whatever it's going to be. So I'm kind of just writing a few sample chapters just now just to get a feel for it and if it's something I want to do or what could it be.
Yeah.
But there is definitely a lot of, you know, old and even like archival interviews with Yuzo Koshiro and Motohiro Kabashima about how they came up with the soundtrack, what they were inspired by, and just the legacy of that soundtrack is so big. You know, there's modern like hip hop producers, for example, a guy called Just Blaze, who's done many songs in hip hop, has gone on record in the last 5 years saying how inspired he was by Streets of Rage 2 and how it helped him come up with beats and stuff. So there's a story to be told there, but I just need to see if it's viable enough for a book. I mean, then I need to ask my agent how badly I might get sued if I don't ask Sega first. So it's good that I have an agent who can actually check these things for me. But if it's all good and we don't have to get permissions, I'll probably just make that my next thing. But
that's cool.
I'd say watch this space on that one, I think.
I mean, I can definitely see a book or even a film about that. I mean, look at the film about the making of Tetris, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there you go. You have the making of the soundtrack. What went into it? That'd be perfect. That'd be great.
Oh, 100%. And not even the first one. Like, so Streets of Rage 3, I don't think a lot of people know this. And I don't know how. So take this with a grain of salt. Like, it's really old interviews, things like that. I think from what I've researched, and I've only just started researching, I think the Streets of Rage 3 soundtrack was actually composed by some form of early AI that Koshiro made himself.
Okay.
That's why it sounds so jagged and almost erratic in points. But I'm still researching that, so don't fully. if someone knows better than me on that topic, I apologize for getting it wrong. But I think it's something like that. Like he coded some sort of language or an algorithm or something like that to compose the songs for him. So there's a whole thing about that that's fascinating. But yeah, watch this space, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So final couple questions for you. One, I guess, would be, I think we know your favorite beat 'em up game would be, do you have a favorite run and gun game?
Oh, that is genuinely a difficult one. I'll give you one just to, because I can't just cop out from that question.
Okay.
Contra 3 on the SNES.
Okay.
I would see that it depends on the day. Sometimes I prefer the original Contra because it's just the original Contra is still Twitch gaming almost perfected. Like it was an early example of them setting like this gold standard for a genre that early.
Yeah, that's true.
The controls are so responsive. There's no like delay or wind up to the character's actions. Everything is like instantaneous. I mean, you get some sprite flicker, you get some slowdown, but it's such a technically accomplished game at its heart. The Contra 3, which I'm saying is my favorite, man, like the advancements in technology in that game are wild. Like Mode 7, sprite manipulation, you know, you have sprites and whole levels like spinning around you, and I'd never seen anything like that. I mean, I played it at my cousin's house. We were staying at my auntie's and uncle's, and the cousins were away for the weekend, so we had their bedroom. We got to stay in their room and play their SNES.
There you go.
And they had a copy of it, and I was just like, there's a bit early on where the Mode 7 plane comes at the screen. I'd never seen anything like that. Like legitimately remember just being blown away, but like, whoa, like you can do that, perspective and things, you know. That aside though, it took what the original Contra did in terms of the mechanics of that genre and the gameplay, and just kicked it up a notch. I mean, it introduced things like well, it maybe not introduced, but it perfected things like aim lock. So you hold down one of the
Okay.
triggers and
Mm-hmm.
it roots you in place so you can get more precision aiming.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll notice in the running gun book where I do mention a lot where I wished some of the games had that, because that little feature goes a long way when you're trying to get you're asking players to pull off really precise shots.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes if it's unreasonable, it can be really frustrating. But aim lock would have solved the problem, right? So
Yep.
just these little things. The soundtrack's amazing, visuals are stunning. Just the kickback. I mean, these are the days before Rumble, right? There was no DualShock technology on the SNES. You can still feel the impact of every explosion. It's the sound design and the visuals, perfection. It's a 10 out of 10 every day for me.
Very cool.
So that's my pick.
Very, very cool. My pick, I mean, one of my favorite games growing up was a game called Bionic Commando. I'm not sure. I think that's a running gun game.
It's in the book.
Okay, cool. Okay, I'll have to pick it up just for that. Speaking of picking it up, when can we expect it to be released? Do you have any idea for that?
I'll say for now it's in the summer.
Okay.
I think I'm still waiting on a final release date, so I don't want to like jump the gun on Bitmap just in case. But yeah, summer.
Okay.
I think I mean production ended I think before the end of the year for me. So all my edits and things like that. So I think everything that happened after was printing, final design, that stuff. So I just have to give a shout out to Bitmap though, because it's not, while I'm writing it, they're the designers. They make the books look and feel as amazing as they do, right? So it's their in-house designers that do it all. Their production quality is always great. And just I had a few help from some freelancers as well, just for like a few formats that I found quite tricky to emulate at the time.
Yeah.
So we had Sega Lord X, who's a great YouTuber. Shout out to Mel, that's his real name. He helped me emulate and review all the Saturn shooters that were on there.
Oh, cool.
Chris Scullion from VG Gamer, like he was fantastic. Just such a great help. We had Kurt Kalata from Hardcore 101 helped us out. Hardcore Gaming 101 rather. Kurt helped me out with a lot of the home computer stuff, so like Amiga, things like that. Okay. Which I could emulate, but I was just running out of time, so I just gave them. Amiga is kind of fiddly to emulate. Yeah. I mean, you can do it, but it takes a bit of a bit of trial and error sometimes. But he could do it like already, so he just did it all for me. That was great.
Nice.
But yeah, shout out to all those guys and just everyone who helped us out. It's a monumental. I mean, Ghost Straight's big, but this is bigger, and it's a lot more work was involved. So yeah, props to everyone who helped me out on that.
Definitely. All right, Dave, my final question for you for this episode of Two Player Mode is, what sort of advice would you give to someone who's looking to start writing about video games?
Oh, yeah. I think like anything, any form of writing, you have to be a reader of it yourself. So just start reading a range of publications. Naturally over time, you'll find writers that you actually enjoy. You'll probably want to start reading them a bit more often, like go back through their, publishing history, things like that. And just get a feel for kind of how they do it, really, the sort of the tone of it, how it's written, the flow, the cadence, that kind of thing. But it sort of depends how you want to go. You could be a games critic like I was. You could start doing a book if you want, or even, if you want to dip a toe in, just become a freelancer. That's sort of a low risk way of doing it. Is how I started. Was I had my site, my main job, and I just dipped a toe in with a few freelance pieces. And so my advice would be start your own website, like a portfolio website, and just start writing stuff of your own. Definitely, don't just use your spell checker on your computer. Get an editor, and that could just be a friend. A friend who's like good at English or whatever your native language is, who can pick up on grammar. So you don't want someone who's just your friend who'll go, "Oh, it's all great, man."
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, but you need someone who's actually going to politely give you, constructive criticism. Because I tell you, like as a writer, you become so blind to your own mistakes. On Go Straight in the running gun book, I was like reading pages over and over, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sure there's no typos on this page. Handed it over to the editor, and they were like, there's a mistake here, because you just get so close to the work, and because you're reading it over and over, your brain goes into kind of like an autopilot kind of mode. You just skim read and you miss things. So start your own site, right? Just start writing stuff yourself. It could just be a little blog for you, you know, but just something to show, potential editors, if you're pitching freelance, hey, they'll want to know what you've done before, right? So you can send them samples, that kind of thing. And even just get it out there yourself. You could start a Substack newsletter.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You can start getting followers that way. There's some gaming publications that only exist on Substack, so it's actually a lot easier for you as a writer to just come up with your own publication now. Try and cultivate a fan base, that kind of thing. But yeah, whether you're going freelance, whether you're trying to get a full-time gig as a games critic at a website like your IGNs, GameSpots, things like that, you need a body of work. So even if it's something on your own website, just keep writing. And the final bit of advice really is just that you might not find your style straight away. You might think you're not that great straight away. Every new piece you write, you might not know it, you might not feel it. You're gradually improving, right? It's a craft that you just have to learn by doing. There's some theory you can learn, right? So things like proper grammar, stuff like that. But the real secret isn't just keep doing it, and you'll find your own tone of voice. You'll find your own little signatures, things like that, that make you stand out, and that only comes by doing it. So yeah, just keep going and try your best not to beat yourself up if it doesn't go right straight away, because I'll tell you right now for free, you'll get rejected by editors way more than you get accepted, but that's okay. It's easy to forget that when you're feeling like crap when a pitch you've worked for ages on doesn't land, but it's just how the game is played. You'll get there in the end, essentially.
Yeah, that is very true. Very sage words of advice there, Dave. So everyone out there listening, go visit Dave's website at dave-cook.com. Go to his shop, pick up his comic books, go buy his Go Straight book, and pre-order if you can the Run and Gun book from Bitmap Books. And where else can people follow you on social media if they want to follow your journey?
Yeah, I'm on like all sort of social platforms. Predominantly use Twitter though, so it's at Dave S Cook. Okay. I'm also like on Instagram and everything else, but you can find links to everywhere I'm at on my website.
There you go.
So yeah, I've made it nice and easy for everyone.
Well, right on. Well, Dave, thank you so much for some of your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.